Esteemed faculty members and fellow participants, my name is Deepshika Devari. I would like to welcome you all to the fourth day of this workshop themed Drug Discovery and Development from Molecule to Medicine with AI, being held at Samrat Vikramaditya Vishwavidyalaya, Ujjain. To begin, I kindly invite Dr. Praveen Khidwarkar sir to present a bouquet to Dr. Shirish Sherlekar sir as a token of our warm welcome. Yesterday, we learned about pharmacovigilance and drug safety. Today, we will explore topics such as regulatory affairs. In pharmaceutical companies, regulatory affairs is the department and profession that acts as a bridge between the company and regulatory bodies worldwide. Let us welcome Dr. Shirish Sherlekar sir with a big round of applause for today's session.
Good morning. So we have studied a little bit on what are clinical trials, what is data management, and what is drug safety. So as we know, once the data is collected from the clinical trials, we need to do something about it. So what we do is write reports. So what we get from animal studies, we write reports on that. What we get from human trials, we write reports on that, research reports. What we get from the factory as to how it is produced, what are the quality parameters of the drug, what are the analytical methods which are used to test the purity of the drug, what is the quality assurance of the drug, so on and so forth. So various data is collected, and that data has to be presented to the government or the regulatory bodies. The department which does this job of interfacing with the government to get an approval of the drug or to maintain the approval of a drug in a market, that means maintain a license for manufacturing, for marketing in various countries across the world, that particular work is done by the regulatory affairs group in any organization. The difference between Indian companies and global companies is that we all know that Indian companies are very strong in generics, whereas global companies are very strong in new molecular entities. As a result of which, what Indians predominantly submit to the government here and abroad is an abbreviated new drug applications or ANDAs. Whereas what they submit in the globe, the multinational companies or who have the research molecules with them, new molecules, they develop the entire dossier from scratch. The abbreviated new drug application is basically predominantly a copy of the original application of the original company with the modification of process of how it is manufactured. What are the analytical methods different? What are the excipients different? That is the only thing which varies. Otherwise, it's virtually a copy-paste of the original document. What I am going to discuss is the original molecule submission to the regulatory authorities across the world, and how is then the ANDA is copied from there. Next. So we'll study about what is regulatory affairs, why is it required, what does it cover, what does it involve, why is it relevant in the pharma industry, what are the different regulatory, and I'll discuss two applications which we do. There are multiple applications which we do, but the two examples which I'll take is INDA and NDA. Rest all of them somehow or the other cull out information from this and add to this information before submitting. Next. So what is a regulatory department? It's a unique mix of science and management. The department deals with scientific information, how to manufacture, chemistry, quality controls, clinical data, animal data. So that is a science part of it. But this data comes from multiple sources within a government, within a pharma company or a biotech company or a device company. This information comes from about 7 or 8 different departments. They have to coordinate with all the departments, compile the application and do it in a time-bound manner. And hence it is also the management capability, the project management capability which is required in an individual. Because if this is not done on time, the revenue coming from the molecule is delayed that much. And if it is a blockbuster drug, a blockbuster is anything which sells about $1 billion a year, a 5-day delay in that can lead to a loss of millions of dollars. And hence, this department is extremely crucial. And for this department, besides science, management or project management is extremely crucial. So you may not be management students, but over a period of time, you will have to understand how to time manage yourself, how to do conflict management, how to do negotiations, so on and so forth, which you learn over a period of time. It plays an important role right from drug discovery. So the moment a molecule is discovered and you start producing data, regulatory folks have a look at it. Now you may think that once you write a report on a Word document, it can be sent to the government. You can't send a Word document to a government in the way you type it. There are different departments which is known as publishing departments. These are not publishing who print and send, but they format the document in a particular way. They have the headers and footers done in particular way. They have the language it in a particular way, the sequencing in a particular way, because that is how regulators want it. Tomorrow, if you are going to give an application for a loan, there is an application which has a sequenced event. You can't say, मैं third page पहले लिखूंगा और first page last में लिखूंगा. You will have to write it according to what the application need is. And hence, here also it is important that so it starts from drug discovery and ends when the product is withdrawn from the market. Even when the product is withdrawn, the regulatory affairs plays an important role because it has to get the license terminated. It has to ensure that the remaining API or the formulated drug is destroyed as per the requirements, and information is communicated to the regulatory to bring about a close. So regulatory is one department along with drug safety which spans from the birth of a molecule, from the thought of a birth of a molecule to the birth of a molecule till its entire demise from this market. So it's a large span of work, and it's a gigantic department in any pharmaceutical company, and hence is a very critical, because if it doesn't perform well, the revenue of the company can go down. Your marketing licenses can be cancelled, and you can have a huge reputational problem as well as a problem of money coming to you. It impacts both consumers and producers. Now, regulatory and drug safety are two departments in whose hands the safety and quality of the molecule rests. And these regulatory departments cannot function on the basis of a commercial interest. They have to work in the interest of the patient. So at times they take decisions which are not good for the company in terms of earning profits. but they have to take that decisions because that is ethical, that is mandatory as per law. And hence regulatory departments many times have a fight with many internal departments, including the CEO and chairman of the organization, because they have commercial interest. Regulatory has commercial, but it is dominated by ethical and interests of the patient. And because it has got the management capability, it connects different departments to take into consideration what is being generated. Next one. So as I said, it is a mix of science and management. So these two departments are within the organization. But you have to deal with various government bodies, and different governments have different regulations or legislations. This is legislation. And hence, the legislation is what they study in and day out. Rules change. Interpretation of rules change. And the regulatory department is supposed to keep a tab on this. And if you have these three, commercialization or marketing of the molecule, manufacturing of the molecule becomes much easy. So it's a large department, requires multiple skills, and it requires a phenomenal amount of management capability. Next one. Now, why is it needed? The need of a regulatory department evolved because of these three tragedies. As I said, in the olden times, there was no regulatory department, there was no pharmaceutical industry, there was no pharmacovigilance department. So chemical industry, as I said before, used to get the chemical, give it to the doctors, and they would treat it whatever dose they felt like for whatever disease they felt like. So the first problem occurred was with sulfanilamide in 1937. And there the problem which we face today also was with diethylene glycol. It was produced as an elixir, and somebody contaminated the diethylene glycol, resulting into huge number of deaths. So sulfanilamide per se has no problem, but the excipient or the carrier which was used for it had a problem, contaminated, as a result of which patients died. The second tragedy which we know is of thalidomide, which we are well aware of and spoke yesterday. And the third is known as the Qatar Laboratories problem. Qatar Laboratories does not exist today, but it existed in 1955. They were producing the polio vaccine, the injectable polio vaccine, or the Salk vaccine as they say. Unfortunately, in the manufacturing, and the Salk vaccine is what is known as a live attenuated vaccine, which means that the virus is alive, but the capability of it to cause a disease has been destroyed. What happened was, very unfortunately, it wired up a large batch with live virus which was not attenuated and was capable of causing the disease. And that vaccine was given to thousands of young children, and that resulted in polio and deaths. So these are the three major tragedies which occurred, because of which the legislations came, and over a period of time the legislations were also modified on a continuous basis. Next one. Now another thing which you would understand is, today pharma biotech industry is the most regulated industry along with the airline industry. Airline is in the next level. Rest all industries are not controlled or not regulated to the extent as the pharma industry or biotech industries. Even device industry is not as well controlled as the drug and biotechnology industry. Regulations are put to develop efficacious and safer drugs. I am not talking of safe drugs. It's safer, because all drugs, as we said yesterday, are poisons. Today I don't know, but in the olden times, where samples of drugs in a pharmacy college were displayed, or even on the shelves of chemists, they used to write poison. The word poison used to be written. Now it is not there on chemist. I don't know about pharmacy colleges. And today also it is true that they are poisons, but not in a specific dose. So that is the reason why regulatory affairs provides insight and guidance. Now I am producing as a researcher, I am discovering certain drug. I don't keep as a researcher a tab on what is required. As a clinical patient trial, I don't keep a tab of what is it. It is a regulatory department of my company which will keep a tab, understand the regulations, its impact on me or the molecule, and will advise me accordingly to do. So they may say, oh, last time we had done this protocol for this disease, it was not very well appreciated and we had to modify it a lot. So this time when you are creating it, be careful on these parameters. Or a regulation changes in manufacturing. We keep changing regulations. We had first GMP, now we have GAMP. So things are very subtly different. They will tell the manufacturing guys, be careful of this, analytical methods. So that is how the regulatory affairs gives insights and guidance in the development of the molecule. And the most important thing which the regulatory wants to understand is rules change every day. They change very minor, but they change. And every regulatory, a good regulatory affairs person will always get connected to rules and regulations from across the world to understand the impact. Because today a rule may be there in Europe, it may not be there in India, but the moment India sees its importance, they may get the rule in India and you have to change. So there is a regulatory intelligence department within the regulatory affairs which keeps a tab on the rules and regulations from across the world. Next one. Now what does it cover? It covers drugs, vaccines, any form of drug, OTC or otherwise, it has to go through a regulatory process. It involves medical devices, and by medical devices, it is not only the robos and the robotic surgery thing. A syringe, a needle is also a medical device, and that through goes. Now, some of them are drug device combinations. Take for example an insulin pen. It is a combination of a device with a drug, or stents which are put for heart blocks. It is a combination of a device and a drug. So all those things, and today you have not only a combination of device and a drug, but you have a combination of a mechanical device, a software into it, and a drug. So there are regulations being developed for software as a device or software as a drug. It's still in a draft stage. Some of the regulations have come in, but it will take longer time. And it has got completely different rules, like a software can be hacked. So if I have given a pacemaker, somebody sitting somewhere can actually hack and stop my heart. So how do I prevent it? So those are the regulations which are coming. So besides drug, disease, device, it is also now a software which is being targeted for quality and assurance. Then biological substances and gene therapies. Biological substances is like monoclonal antibodies. Cell and gene therapies are the latest additions where gene therapies have already come into the market. Cell therapies have also. Cell therapy is basically what is known as the CAR T therapy. CAR T stands for chimeric antigen receptor T cell. What happens in CAR T therapy, it is used for certain types of cancers. What happens is actually they take your blood, they remove the lymphocytes, the T lymphocytes from the blood. Those T lymphocytes are modified in a pharmaceutical company and then it is given back to the same patient. So that is a true form of cell therapy. If you want any time to see a plant of that cell therapy, and if you go to Calcutta, in the Tata Medical Center, which is a cancer hospital in Calcutta run by the Tatas, you have this plant installed by a pharmaceutical company. So you have the patient, cells are taken, sent to the plant modifies it, sends it back to the doctor for giving. It occurs in a very seamless manner. Otherwise, there are factories in Bangalore called Immune Act, or I think Intas in Gujarat somewhere, they have this plant where such therapies are being produced. Then there is regulatory affairs for chemicals. Now chemicals are two types of chemicals. One is the API which we are talking of. But the chemical industry which produces a sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, soda bicarb, those companies are also regulated. They are regulated slightly differently, but there also there is a regulatory department. And next is all radiological substances which are used for diagnostic purposes. So if you are doing a CT scan, they may inject a dye. When you're doing an angiography, they inject a dye. Now all those dyes and chemicals also go through the same rigorous process of regulatory as a drug. So it's a wide expanse of responsibility, wide expanse of regulations, and wide expanse of the material which they use, the data or documents which they use. Next one. So it's a link between the company and the government regulatory bodies, because that is the department which talks to the regulatory bodies, not anybody else, unless it is a specialized requirement like clinical or toxicology. Then they will take those people to the government and they will talk to them. Responsible for communication regarding discovery, development, marketing and withdrawal. Now when you have a drug in the market, many times you change the formulation. Many times you change the process of manufacturing. Many times plants change. All this has to be reported and approved by the government regulatory body. That particular work is also done by regulatory. It's responsible for preparation and compilation of all documents. So as I said, within the regulatory department, there are three distinct departments. One is which writes the documents. So all the technical document as they call, or the manufacturing quality and control, CMC documents which is there, that is predominantly written by the factory guys or the regulatory guys. Then they collect all data from everywhere else. And that is what is known as document publishing. Because as I said, it has to be in a particular format, in a particular mode. And then there is an assembly of this document, because these are all submitted electronically. So your document should be able to fit into the software which is used by the regulators. Paper submissions have dramatically dropped, barring in certain African countries and Latin American countries. Paper submissions have stopped, CD submissions have stopped, pen drive submissions have stopped. So it is electronic. So if your electronic system does not match with the regulatory electronic system, the document does not go to them. So this department of submission publishing ensures that document is correctly formatted, document is correctly assembled, and it is as per the rules and regulations required by a given country. Now imagine the problem which it was there when every country had its own thing and thought process. And regulatory departments had to understand all this and create it for a specific country. It has to keep a close watch on drug regulation, as I said, understand the impact on it. Not only the regulation, it also keeps a tab on what is the correspondence going on between their company for their products with the government, for other company products in a similar therapy area with the government, and what is the question and answer and what are the difficulties. Because this is what falls under the domain of known as regulatory intelligence. And that is what they use in their future submissions. Next one. So there are different government agencies and people who are involved. The first and foremost is the central agency. Like you have in India, the CDSCO, it's the central agency. In India, you have also got state departments of food. So there are different responsibilities of these two, and both the departments can ask questions to the regulatory body, authorities within the organization, and they have to answer that. So this is through regulatory agency. Then industry, it's predominantly known as the sponsor. So the requirement of a generic industry is slightly different than the new molecular industry. Requirement of an API manufacturer is different than a formulation guy. So there are different regulations which they think, but all of them are known as sponsors. Then they have to interact with professional bodies. There are bodies of doctors, there are bodies of pharmacists, nurses. There are even patient bodies with whom they have to interact, because they may have objection to what the company is doing. And there are objections raised in Europe and US, even in India now and in Africa, where they raise objections to a particular drug because of certain things which they feel is not correct. And there the regulatory again steps in to resolve the issue. This is one of the major problems, politics and media. Politicians unfortunately do not understand the drug and they have their own thought processes and own politics. Like you see in COVID, अरे वैक्सीन मत लेना क्योंकि वो उसका टेस्टिंग नहीं हुआ है. The politician doesn't even understand how a testing is done, nor his aides understand anything about it. But all of them took it. All of them took it who were shouting right from US to India. But they wanted a political mileage out of it. Now here the regulatory steps in, understands the problem and tries to negate it or tries to remove it so that the problem does not spread. Similarly is media. Most uneducated group, but talk a lot as if they know the world. Very few journalists, very few will really understand the subject on which they are writing. It's very unfortunate, but very true. If you see their qualifications, any of them in the media, their qualifications are not more than BCom or BA. At the most, it will be an MA in history, which has got nothing to do with understanding medicine. And you can't understand medicine. So what they do, they go to 10 different people, ask them their views, create their own view and write an article. So hence on topics which are unrelated to a profession, nobody should rely on them. But unfortunately, they are an important cog. They can spread things and hence you need to be careful about it. They are also useful because at times the agency or the government or the pharma industry may try to suppress certain facts. And it is here where these two departments of people set become very important to get it out so that it benefits. Consumers also are extremely important and a vocal group today. You have associations besides consumer, you have a Heart Association, you have a Parkinson's Association, you have a Sickle Cell Anemia Association. Various associations of patients are there which exert pressure on basically on pricing and on availability of drug. And there again, regulatory departments have to come. And obviously then there are many gray areas in between. You don't know who will start what. So you have to be careful and understanding of all this. Next one. Today's lecture is short, so I will take this. What is an IND application? IND application is just an investigational new drug. As the name indicates, it's an investigational drug. I don't know whether it is going to be useful or not. So an IND application is done after completion of discovery and clinical steps. What data would be there? What is the data till preclinical tests that you would have? Any idea? Sorry? Okay. How you have manufactured the drug? Or how would you manufacture the drug? What other information which you will have? Preclinical में क्या करते हैं? Before human trials, what studies are done? Toxicology. So toxicology information will be there, right? So these are the two main information that you have. It is submitted by the organization who has discovered the drug and wants to test it in humans. It is at that point of time that you submit an IND. It is submitted to regulatory authorities in all countries where you would like to do a clinical trial. So if I want to do a clinical trial in 40 countries, I need to create 40 different applications. The core application would be the same, but the administrative information, as they say, the introductory letter and specific requirements of a country change. So all those 40 applications are to be created. And it's a formal process by which the company seeks permission to conduct a clinical trial on humans in different countries. Now in different countries, regulations will be different. So you will have to follow all those regulations for it. So in a large company, a multinational company, Usually the regulatory department is split into a US department, into a Europe department, where UK is also considered into it. It has a Middle East department, it has an Africa department, it has an Asia department, and it has a Japan department. So barring US and Europe, all of them are either compiled together as international department or differentiated between Asia Pac and Americas, Asia Pac and Africa and Americas, Latin America. So like that, there are different departments which coordinate the activity for across the world. Next one. Now it has three major components: animal studies, PKPD data, toxicology studies, and to show that it is reasonably safe to be used in humans. Now when animal studies are done and toxicology studies are done, the reports for that is written by the respective departments, not by the regulatory. So they will collect the information from those departments, or they will give them templates and say, write it according to this. So the templates are there in any company. Those templates are picked up, they are on the server. So the animal toxicology writer can go there, pick up the template, fill the data, and send it to the regulatory. Similarly, the person who is doing your CMC data or pharmacology data will also receive a template he will write. Now when all these filled templates come to the regulatory, they will prepare what is known as a submission package. And that package is what will go to the regulatory affairs department. So animal studies, that is pharmacological and toxico, is one component. The second component is known as CMC data. That is chemistry, manufacturing, and control. The word chemistry today is misnomer because now the molecules are more of proteins and cells and so on and so forth. So you won't have a chemistry of a cell. Chemistry is called because the older molecules were inorganic chemicals or chemical entities, and hence the name continues. But when you say chemistry today, it involves all kinds of substance. So if it is a protein, it will have a protein structure, it will have its molecular weight, so on and so forth. So chemistry or composition, that is why I have written here the word composition for all those like biologics, vaccines, cell and gene therapies. Manufacturing data, what is the plant? How is the analysis of the drug carried out? What are the stability studies? All those kinds of things. Was the excipient tested? How was the API tested? How was the finished product tested for its purity or for its impurities in it? Which impurities have you identified? Because all drugs have impurities, all. And they are permissible impurities. Now take for example NDMA is a impurity which develops while manufacturing of ranitidine, but it is not permitted. So you have to be careful of not having that. But in many other drugs, certain impurities to a certain amount are always permitted, and that also needs to be specified, including the quantity. Then the batch which you have produced, what is the tests on the batches done? All that information comes in chemistry, manufacturing, and control is what is the quality control on the drug. What tests did you conduct? What periodicity you conducted? What did you find out? Why was the variation from batch to batch, so on and so forth. Here, we are producing it in very small quantities, and the drug is in a pilot plant. So you manufacture in a small quantity because you are going to require it for human trials, not for general human consumption. So it is done in a test plant or a pilot plant, and later on it is transferred to the main plant. It will also contain the clinical trial protocol. So the protocol now is written by a medical department in collaboration with multiple other departments. So this protocol is again, after it is written on the template, comes to the regulatory department for doing the submission publishing. It has an information brochure, also called the IB. IB is the short form for information brochure, but that is a colloquial term which is short form which is used. Nobody says I am submitting information brochure while they are talking. It's IB I have submitted. IB is a document which is given to the doctor who is doing the clinical trial for him to understand what the drug is, what is the rationale behind developing the drug, what is the dose, what is the mechanism of action, what are the probable adverse events or adverse reactions with it, drug interactions, so on and so forth. So it's a big document of about 50-60 pages which is given to the concerned doctor. Protocol, as I said, varies from about 100 pages to about 300-400 pages. It contains the hypothesis, methodology, inclusion-exclusion criteria, how are you going to analyze, which statistical test you are going to put, what are your endpoints, so on and so forth. So these two documents basically give an idea to the regulators as to how you intend to conduct a trial. And with that is attached the case report form which is created, an informed consent. Now, ethically, the informed consent is one of the most crucial documents which needs to be submitted. The informed, and if it is multiple countries, you will have to submit it not only in English, but in multiple languages. Now, take for example, India as a country. India is a unique country where you have a language, a dialect which change every 50 miles, but a language which changes from state to state. In such a situation in India, if you want to do a clinical trial, you have to submit informed consent in that many languages, whichever state you want to do. And unfortunately, if in MP, a guy from Tamil Nadu is staying, then you will have to give it to him in Tamil. You can't, unless he understands Hindi. You can't give it to him in Hindi. And now they have done additional thing that you have to video record the consent, and then submit it when you're doing an NDA application. How many people sitting here will understand English to the level which is written there? Some will, not necessarily. Person coming from a village, will he understand English? Then he will rely on what jo main bol raha hu. Why should I believe in what you are saying? What is that? I am talking on an ethical plane, not on an honesty plane. I am talking on an ethical plane. So the one whom I am talking is that. Now another point, good that you raised it. Another point is many people can't read. Not only in India, even in US they can't read. Even in Germany they can't read. Many in the villages. So there you have to get a third person who is independent of both the doctor or the trial investigator and the patient, bring him in, get a patient's relative. The four will sit, and all this is recorded, video recorded, and he will explain to the patient and the relative what is talking. And then the informed consent. So informed consent is something extremely important. If by chance also you miss taking a signature or a thumb impression, the patient is removed from the trial. So this is something which the regulators look at very, very, very closely. Then next is the Institutional Review Board approval. IRB, as it is called, is an independent body, independent of the government, independent of the company. No employee of the company is on that IRB. How is the IRB constituted is defined by a group of countries, all countries are there, and this group created what is known as ICH-GCP, International Conference of Harmonization and Good Clinical Practice. So there is an international group, India is also represented there, small African countries are also represented, and they decided that everywhere, wherever you want to do a clinical trial, you have to take an IRB approval. Now, normally, this IRB consists of doctors, toxicologists, a specialist of that particular drug, pharmacologist, and besides that, it contains a priest, a social worker, and a police guy. Now, why is the social worker, police and all? To make sure that they should not feel that the drug is unethically given to somebody. And if they have objections, then, and they read through the informed consent, so on and so forth. So that is why this IRB approval is extremely important, and it has to be submitted to the regulatory authorities so that they are able to give an approval to it. And this gives them an understanding of how the trial will be conducted, what will be the quality control on the trial, ethical control, how will the results be done, so on and so forth. So this is what an IND application is. It runs into hundreds of pages, and it is submitted through the electronic route into directly to the government. So you are not in direct touch with the government, but it goes through through a formal route of an electronic means. Next one. The next application which I'll take is what is known as a new drug application. As the name indicates, the new drug application is done after the trials are over. Now, in between, when the trials are going on, after the completion of phase 1, there are, whatever is submitted are just called submissions. So what are these common submissions before? So you change a protocol, which is known as a protocol amendment, for some reason or the other. You suddenly find that more deaths are occurring in a patient, so you want to change the prescribing information. Now, if you change the protocol, your case report form will also change. So all these kind of changes which occur, you have to continuously submit it to the regulators, and they are known as standalone submissions. They are not given any name. And again, that is the responsibility of the regulatory department, and maintain a track and a record of what was submitted when. Because tomorrow if somebody questions, you can do it. So there are softwares and systems which are deployed, which keep a track. So you can just with a key of a button, you can get exactly what you submitted where, or you can keep a track of how the protocol changed over the period of time of a clinical trial. There are also submissions which are done on fatal cases. So when there are deaths occurring in a trial, those cases, a detailed history of that particular patient is sent to the institutional review board. It is also submitted to the regulatory authorities. So like that, there are a large number of submissions which occur on a continuous basis. So regulatory department is extremely busy managing the government, managing the company, and different kinds of departments. So once you have completed all the trial, then you write, after the first phase, you will write a first phase report, which is known as a clinical trial report. And that clinical trial report is again submitted to the government. The government will have a look at it. They will say it is fine. And then they will say, okay, now submit to me the protocol for the phase 2 trial. So the phase 2 trial protocol will again go through the same process and be submitted. After phase 2, you will write another report. Now during the second time, you will give them the trial for phase 1 report, phase 2 report, protocol of phase 2, and then in phase 3, you will do similar, doing a compilation of all of them. So it is not that you can't tell the government, nahi, ek to last time diya tha, abhi wapas kyun chahiye tumko? You can't say that. So you have to keep a track of all those amendments, all those changes, and keep submitting to the government, so it is done in a systematic manner. Now, once you have completed all those studies, you need to submit a new drug application for approval. Now, by and large, the company is very sure after the 3 phases of this thing that they will get a license out of it. So when they are pretty sure that the data was good, I will get a license, there is a need to move from a pilot batch to a commercial batch. Here the plant will be different, the quantum of things will be different, hence the analytical methods will need to change a bit or modify a bit, packaging inserts will come up, material for packaging will come up, so on and so forth, and so also stability for every batch, analytical testing for each batch will have to be done. So one is that within the company, this movement from a pilot batch to a commercial batch starts occurring. And again, CMC data is collected there. A large amount of chemistry, manufacturing and control data is collected. Now, in a new drug application or an NDA, It's a comprehensive data of drugs submitted to regulatory authorities or biopharma who want an approval. And now in this, you will actually give them why you are, for what disease are you wanting the clearance. So if it is an infective agent, I may give a application for pneumonia, urinary tract infection, respiratory infection, gastrointestinal tract, naming each of the disease. But it is not necessarily that you will get all the approved indications. And it is possible that one country may approve everything, the other country may not approve everything. And if that occurs, your prescribing information and label will change. So regulatory department again has to modify it accordingly. I'll give you a very simple example which I have seen. Dapsone is a very old compound used for your leprosy. It's a very old compound. It was manufactured by the Wellcome laboratories in the world. In India, it was sold by Burroughs Wellcome. We used to have regular audits. So they audit the prescribing information. There was a particular clause which was inserted in precautions and warnings on the instruction of the government of India. That particular precaution and warning was not there anywhere in the world. Now, because the regulatory in India were forced to do it, they did it. But when the headquarters of the company did an audit, they raised an objection as to why you have done it. So the regulatory had to come in and show them the draft saying that this is the government order and on this basis we have done it. Then they picked up that saying that, oh, this has to be included everywhere else in the world also. And they went and changed the prescribing information for other world. So you imagine the regulatory department is so crucial and so much work is there in that department that you cannot have a comfortable life in terms of saying कि ठीक है आज नहीं करते हैं कल करते हैं. You have to do it that day of that day. You cannot keep postponing things. The NDA includes extensive data on drug safety and efficacy, manufacturing process and data submitted in IND. Now, the most concentration in an NDA application is on the data which you have submitted regarding safety and efficacy which you have got while doing the human phase clinical trials. So there is a whole summary of it besides the actual reports that you put into it, which will give the regulator an idea of what is the safety and what is the efficacy and what is the final dose. Because dose can keep changing from phase 1 to phase 3 as the final dose in phase 3. So you have to give that information and regulators concentrate on that. Besides the other thing, they concentrate on this also. The NDA includes safety and efficacy. It also includes CMC. Now, as I said, when you move from a pilot batch to a commercial batch, this particular thing may change and you have to change it. You have to also give all the preclinical and the clinical data and the proposed label. Label is the core data sheet, as I said in the US, or the structured medicinal product characteristics as SMPC, as it is in summary of product characteristics, as it is in UK. India and other Latin American countries, they accept that and they do not ask anything specific. Now, once this is submitted to the regulatory authorities through the electronic channel, because you are not meeting them face to face, even in India now it has become electronic. Otherwise, initially in India there was a paper submission. So you used to carry 4 copies of that document which is in thousands of pages and then submit it to regulators. Today it is electronic. One thing which electronic submission has done is influence has gone down. Unnecessary and undesirable influence has gone down. So what they do globally, India, Latin America, Middle East, Africa, they are not as well equipped as Europe, Japan and US is. Now in US there are different departments to evaluate. So there is a group which evaluates only biologics. There is a group which evaluates small molecules. There is a group which evaluates vaccines and one group which evaluates cell and gene therapies and one group which evaluates devices. Each of them have statisticians, clinical pharmacologists, specialists in the individual subject, manufacturing guys, quality control guys, that whole team is there. So when you submit an application to them, it is sent to all of them. either the whole application or a section of it which they want them to evaluate. Now they do the evaluation, it takes about 6 months for them to evaluate. They will evaluate all of it and then they will have questions. So there are two meetings which occur. One is a meeting with the FDA or the MHRA or the EU or Japan, which occurs before the submission. So the regulatory department along with its experts will go to the regulators and tell, this is what I am submitting, this is what the details is, in short, this is how what we are asking you to permit us to do, so on and so forth. So that is called a pre-registration meeting. After the analysis which these regulators will do, they will have lots of questions. And they have hundreds of questions for you. So you will have to answer them electronically. If you want a clarity on them, you send an electronic question to them on an electronic mode and they will answer you that question. Once you have all the questions understood and cleared, each of the department for which the question is will write the answer and those answers are also submitted to the regulators. Many times the regulators are not satisfied and they keep asking you questions. After a particular gap, say 1 month or 2 months, there is a meeting which occurs with the regulators of the company specialists. And there you have to actually convince the regulator that whatever you are saying is in the interest of the patient, the risk-benefit ratio of the drug is good, and that the population will benefit. This is what, and there is an intense dialogue and a viva kind of a thing going on, because there are questions which are shooting from the regulatory guys, and you have to be prepared for that. And if they are not satisfied, they will not approve a drug but ask for modifications. If they are satisfied with it, then they will say, okay, we are satisfied with your questions, we have no further questions, and we will come back to you. They don't say in the meeting whether you will get the manufacturing and the approval license or not. Once they come back, they will decide to give a complete approval for whatever you have asked for, or give a partial approval and then say do more studies and then only we will give you. In my career, what I have seen is that many times we have submitted. I'll give you an example of a drug called Crestor. Crestor is cravastatin. It's a statin in the same group as simvastatin and Lipitor and those kinds of drug. The drug belongs to AstraZeneca, and I was involved both in its clinical trials and in its registration. So initially the trial was done with about 80 or 100 milligram dose. It was done all over the world, and we prepared the entire dossier for the world including India, and it was rejected. The reason for rejection which the authorities said was the dose is very high and the risk-benefit ratio, that means the reduction in cholesterol as compared to the risk, and the risk was muscle wasting, or medical terminology which is known as rhabdomyolysis, that is destruction of your muscles. All statins are known to destroy your muscles. Whether you like it or not, it will destroy your muscles. So they say this risk-benefit ratio is not good, and hence we are not approving the drug. Do a trial with lesser dose. So in that meeting it was discussed what is the dose which they think would be appropriate. So AstraZeneca then dropped the dose to 20 milligram, 40 milligram, 2 doses. They did the trial for another around 1.5 years. The trial ran all over the world, and we submitted the data again. It took 4 years to get the approval for 20 and 40 milligram. So like this, many times it occurs that the regulators are not satisfied with your answers, and they will like you to do clinical trials. In one of the occasions, the drug was ceftriaxone. The regulators did not approve pneumonia as an indication across the world. They allowed all other indications, not pneumonia. They said on pneumonia specific, do a separate trial and then submit the data to me, and then only I will see. So in that case also a partial approval was given, like urinary tract infection, respiratory infections but not pneumonia. Like that they can also give you a partial approval, ask for something more to be done, and you submit another application to give that separate indication to you. So when you are doing this, you have to understand, when I am insisting that you need to understand different rules and regulations and the way regulatory departments function. I'll give you an example again of the cephalosporin called ceftriaxone. Ceftriaxone was discovered by a company called Fujisawa, which is based in Japan. And at that point of time, there were other third generation cephalosporins which were discovered and already being marketed in US and Europe. It was cefotaxime, ceftriaxone. These were the two injectable third generation cephalosporins, and ceftriaxone was supposed to be a comparator of that or a competitor of them. Now, ceftriaxone trials were predominantly done in Japan. So they concentrated on how the Japanese patients will work. They did not do much trials globally. Whereas cefotaxime and ceftriaxone trials were done predominantly in US and Europe. Now, there is a slight difference between how trials are done in Europe, or how regulators want the trials to be done in Europe and US, and how the regulators of Japan wants to do a trial. In US, if you see the papers of cefotaxime or ceftriaxone, if you see the clinical papers, you will find the efficacy to the tune of 99%, 100% in also serious diseases like meningitis. We all know as doctors that 100% results are never there in meningitis. Some patients do die. So, but the clinical trial showed it, because the protocol was written in such a manner that all dangerous patients were basically excluded from the trial in inclusion-exclusion criteria. That is the way US and Europe conduct studies. So you will find the efficacy rates as 99%, 98%, 100%. Japan does it in a different manner. So like what was the difference was, in cefotaxime trial, meningitis patient comes in, they will send the CSF fluid for antibiotic sensitivity. If it is sensitive to cefotaxime, then they will give it. If it is not sensitive, the patient is excluded. Like that they do. Now, when you do this, if you get a result of 98%, then it is not that good a drug. Japanese people do it something very differently. They diagnose meningitis, enter the trial. Even if it is not sensitive, they will not remove the patient from the trial. Because many times, even if you are not sensitive to a particular antibiotic, it can still act. Because the body of different humans is different. So only a lab report does not tell you whether the antibiotic is good or bad. Now, if the patient did not respond to that ceftriaxone, his fever didn't come out, neck rigidity didn't go out, then they would remove the patient out as failure and still count it into the analysis. So obviously the results would be much low. So their efficacy result was that out of 100, 70 people survived. Now when you compare this, and regulators in US and Europe had that thought in mind. So they say, oh, it's a very bad antibiotic, I'm not going to give it an approval. So only in Japan it was approved. We in India got it approved because we knew it was a better antibiotic. And then for the rest of the world, they did a trial the way US and Europe does. The efficacy results was same, 98 and 100%. And then they got an approval there. So that is the reason why you need to understand how a regulator in a given country thinking. Rules, regulations, same. But the thinking process is different. And you can challenge that thinking only till a particular level. You can't challenge it all the time. And hence those are limitations. And hence a good department is one which understands not only what is happening in one country, but all the country, and analyze the impact of that in today's molecule in different countries or different molecules in different countries. So that is how the analysis of all them is done. Now these two are the most critical applications which occur. And the last application which occurs is in the form of a withdrawal of a drug, where many departments are involved other than regulatory bodies and all. Next one. Now CTD is a term which you use, very common in regulatory affairs, which is known as a common technical document. And now it is known as eCTD, or electronic common technical document. Now what was happening in the world, that different pharma companies, regulatory bodies wanted the application to be submitted what they wanted. Now you imagine when it is a multinational company, you are you want to market your drug in about at least 100 countries. There are about 192 countries in the world, but you expect it to be marketed at least in 100 countries. Now imagine producing 100 different applications for the same drug in a format which is required by that country. So you have 100 different applications in 100 different ways, and you have to manage the question and answers from there and keep your intelligence intact also. Not intelligence of the human being, but intelligence of the regulations. Now that caused a lot of problem, lot of work, lot of wastage of money. So all the countries came together and they first said, okay, let's agree on what format I will have. And that format now in which applications are submitted all over the world is known as the common technical documents. However, some countries were not ready and hence they accepted it as a paper copy. So in India till recently also, Latin America, Africa, paper copies used to go. Then they moved to the next level where they submitted it through floppy disk or CD drives or pen drives. And now virtually everybody has moved through an electronic. So all the governments have a software. They give you an access. The access is one or two persons in a company. They are authorized to do the submissions, and through what is known as the gateway, they submit the application. If everything is fine, formatting, content, sections, not the content per se, but the sections, they are in the manner in which the common technical document should be. Then the gateway will accept it and give you a receipt that your application has been accepted and this is the serial number of your application. If your formatting or content in terms of the headings and all is not as per what the common technical document wants, some sections are missing, you have left blank pages, it will reject the application. And it will tell you why it has been rejected and you have to correct that before submissions. Previously what used to happen, no matter what you submit, the regulators had to see it and then tell you, oh, ABC is missing, please submit it. Now how much extra faltu work this is. So now they have said कि ठीक है, अगर हमारे हिसाब से एप्लीकेशन नहीं दिया आपने तो आपका सिस्टम ही रिजेक्ट कर देगा. तो आप फिर देखो तुमको 10 साल लगाने या 50 साल लगाने तुम्हारी मर्जी, बट हम तो नहीं देखने वाले उसको. So that is the benefit. Now people have become disciplined, and once the common technical document, now this ECTD has resolved large number of problems of resubmission of data. And that has reduced the workload on the government as well as on the people in the regulatory and other departments who are doing that job. Now the ECTD or CTD has been converted into 5 modules. These 5 modules are I have given a small gist here. It's not the total content, but I have given you a gist. Now module 1 predominantly contains administrative and prescribing information. Why I am saying prescribing information here? Because some countries, a company doesn't want to market the drug for all the indications. It wants to market only for certain indications. So hence it could be different. Or they know that in a particular country an extra details will be required, so they will add those details to it as per country requirement. And this all comes from regulatory intelligence. So it has, what is administrative? Administrative is basically a cover letter requesting the regulators to give you a permission and give a little bit of a brief what it is. Then there is module 2. Module 2 has 5 parts. Quality overall summary. So whatever is the quality parameters of your drug, manufacturing parameters, testing parameters, all those things, the tests, actually conducted tests and their results is what you give it there. Non-clinical overview. Animal studies which you have done during this thing, computer modeling studies which you would have done, or you would have done in biotechnology compounds, the tests which you have done on E. coli and to grow that organism and the drug, all those details are given in the non-clinical overview. Then you give a non-clinical summary besides the non-clinical detailed data. Summaries and overviews are given for people who are not linked to that subject, but they want to understand what is the total drug. If I am a clinical guy, I may not want to look at the whole non-clinical and toxicology data. I may only look at the overview. but the toxicologist will look at everything of that. So that is why this is the way it is done. Then it is clinical review, that is phase 1, 2, 3 ka trial data, efficacy, safety, dosages, all those data जितना भी है वो clinical overview में जाता है, and clinical summary. What is the risk? What is the benefit? वो सब clinical summary में जाता है. This third is quality data. This module is related to quality of the trials and the experiments which you have done, and a little bit on the quality of the drug, because here you are producing the drug in research-based quantities, not in bulk quantities. Module 3 is pure quality data of the manufactured drug, analytical test, stability test, so on and so forth, lethal doses, all that comes from here. And when I say quality, it is quality of the active ingredient, it is quality of excipients, quality of impurities, quality of carriers, quality of the package. So whether it is a strip, a foil, what is the quality of aluminium which you have used? If it is a bottle, is it siliconized or it is non-siliconized? What is the quality of glass? What is the quality of cap? What is the quality of cap के अंदर एक और चिपका रहता है white colored or black color? What is the quality of that? How is the degradation of that? इतना detail में वो जाते हैं because the stability test and quality test, stability particularly, which you've done in a controlled environment, is not there in a market setting. Even in your home setting, you don't keep the medicine as it would be in there. If temperature rises to 50, your degradation is much faster. If the temperature drops to 4 degrees, some drugs may degrade faster. Not a standard one कि ठंड हो गई तो later degrade होगा. So that is why this quality data is very important, and they decide the expiry date on that basis. Module 4 is non-clinical study reports. So all the toxicology data, animal study data, animal modeling data, computer modeling data, all that goes here. And the fifth module is all the trial data of first, second, phase clinical trial reports in an extremely detailed manner. And in this, you give a summary of all these documents. So that if somebody at the top, the big boss, wants to read it, he will read only the summary, and then he can have questions which he can ask. So this ECTD today is the standard format which is used across the world irrespective, barring some very small countries which do not have the electronic capability, and there still you can find paper data or on pen drives and so on and so forth. But it is extremely becoming rarer and rarer because virtually all countries today have some or the other electronic systems. Right? So that is how regulatory affairs is. I have concised it as compared to what the department does. I have concised it in a small lecture, but if it is in detail, it may take about 6 or 7 days of 8 hours session to understand the basics of regulatory. This I have talked in general. You have regulatory different for biologics, you have different regulatory for vaccines, and you have different regulatory for chemical entities because there are different rules. And now, because software is into consideration, you have also different regulatory for software. And those regulations are similar but greatly different also. So if you are in regulatory, you will have to understand each one of them, or if a deeper course is done, you can go into the more of its depth. Yeah? That is the last slide, right? Okay. This is the last one. This is just to give you a gist of what the Department of Regulatory Affairs does. It does vendor selection. Now you get APIs from many people, active ingredients, because you are a formulator, you don't want to manufacture an API. So vendor selection, you want packaging material. You want chemicals for your analytical lab. You want animals. You want the manufacturing plant which comes from somewhere. You may assemble it in your place, but it comes from somewhere. So all the vendors are basically selected or approved by the regulatory agencies from a regulatory perspective, not financial, from a scientific basis. They write drug master file ka reviews. especially in A&D application, drug master file is heavy. Approve the API, the quality of the active pharmaceutical ingredient, whether manufactured by the company or bought from outside. Every batch which comes is tested and approved by them. Excipients and packaging material. So at every stage of manufacturing, they are involved here. The next you will see is patent and regulatory strategy. Regulatory strategy is another department within the regulatory department which decides on what should be your strategy to submit an application. And the reason for this strategy is large number of companies, global companies, manufacture drugs for the same disease. Slight difference here and there in the efficacy and safety or in the terms of manufacture. Now they keep a close watch on each other's molecule and how the regulators are interacting. If there is a problem, they will hold their molecule, correct that or answer the question which has been asked to another companies and then submit it. So today, though you may say I am a new molecule, you may be very similar in shape and structure to the existing one. Especially because now biotechnology compounds are concerned, I can create insulin by 5 different ways and still claim that I am the originator of it because my cell line will be different. So like that, it is there. Hence, the strategy is there. Patent. You patent every drug, but you don't patent when you're doing animal studies. You patent it somewhere between first and phase 3, depending upon how quickly you are expecting the drug to come into the market. That is a strategy which they prepare along with regulatory and the patent department and the commercial department. The test, import and manufacturing licenses. When you are doing clinical trials, you by and large import a drug. So if it is manufactured in Europe, it will be imported by US, India, Latin America, China, wherever you are doing. You require an import license that is taken off by the regulatory department in that country. Formulation evaluation and final approval. Regulatory support during product development. Now, many a times when you are developing a product, you develop for one indication or two indication. Then during the development, you suddenly realize that no, it can be used for another 5 indications. So you will discuss it with commercial and regulatory guys to say, should we develop all the indications at the same time or should we delay it? That is where regulatory again comes into picture. And documents and data review. They review all documents, all data because they have the regulatory understanding. And if a clinical trial report need to be modified in its language or presentation, they will talk to the concerned department. Manufacturing, import, export, licensing they do, technical documents, that is CMC document they do, batch execution because every batch is tested and it has to be submitted for its approval, so that they do. Finalization of technical documents, what is the plant, what is the structure, have you changed it, what is the change, what is it going to cause a problem to the manufacturer of the final formulation, and finished products and its changes. Then in case of BAB, if you are a generic manufacturer, then what you have to do is predominantly show to the regulator of that country that your drug is similar in its availability to the body and its action. So you do BAB studies. And that BAB studies is then submitted to the regulators. They also do CMC writing. All this is done. This is one of the critical junctures because that gives you regulatory intelligence. It is answering of questions. And inspection of manufacturing sites. Regulatory is involved besides the audit department. So when a regulator comes to you for audit, it is the regulatory manufacturing site only. If it is clinical research related audit, there is a separate audit department within the company. But otherwise, in a manufacturing site, the regulatory department comes into picture. The quality assurance department comes into picture and they help the conduction of that inspection or an external audit. So this is, in short, the work of what a department does. So if you see whether it is birth of a molecule or death of a molecule, on both the occasions they are present there like a Panditji to do the Kriya Karma of the final birth or of the death. So they are present through the thing. So that's the last slide. If you have any questions. Yeah. is regulated and what? Orphan drugs का. Good question. What is an orphan drug? Now what happens is, in the past, all large pharmaceutical companies which are into development of new molecules, their discovery department with the help of chemists used to create a large number of new molecules. Whether they will be useful, not useful is none of their concern. They would just create a new molecule, right? They would test it first structurally, whether the structure activity relationship is same, which is part of discovery, on a computer. Now if they find that it is not useful, the structure compatibility is not there with the receptor and all, they would leave the molecule on the shelf. Or they may say, the government will say that okay, you are not doing anything for this molecule, you don't want to keep it, fine, don't keep it, we will keep it. So the molecule ka material jo hai, the liquid, solid, powder, whatever, is kept. And it is kept on the shelf for anybody to decide if they want to use it. That particular molecule is known as an orphan molecule. मतलब किसी का भी नहीं है, कोई माई बाप नहीं है उस molecule का. But it is under the control of the government now. It's not under the control of an individual company. Or it can remain with the individual company, but the rules and regulations of how to commercialize it remain the same, but the control is of the government. I'll give you an example of that. Gleevec. Have you heard about the drug Gleevec, which is of Novartis? India में बहुत बड़ा तमाशा हुआ था उस drug का. It's used for a particular type of cancer. Now, orphan drugs, when they are researched, they are funded by the US government. So the pharmaceutical company hardly pays anything. They may do the research, but it is paid for by the government. And Gleevec as a molecule was developed, if I am not mistaken, by University of Chicago or University of Pennsylvania. I am not very sure about the university which did it, under the aegis of Novartis. So when Novartis picked up that drug, Gleevec was the brand name of it, when they picked up that drug, the US government funded it, completely the clinical trials. And they started marketing it into the world. In India, it was not there. So understand that instead of spending money from their own pocket, it was the government which helped them with the money to conduct that. Secondly, if you are testing that, you get a large number of tax benefits. So obviously the cost of development is not that. So that is what an orphan drug is. It doesn't belong to anybody. It may be developed by a university, by the government labs, but anybody can use it. So it's an orphan drug. So that is how it is used. Orphan diseases उसको इसलिए कहा जाता है, as you said, it is rare. But उसको इसलिए orphan कहा जाता है because the population is so small that no pharma company is ready to invest into it because commercial output नहीं मिलेगा. किन केस में? हाँ, बट उसके लिए डिस्कवर तो किसी को करना पड़ेगा ना, तो वो कौन करेगा? फार्मा कंपनी को नहीं करना है because it's too costly. And the amount of people, that is why some drugs, if you say like a gene therapy which is there for spinal dystrophy, there is a drug discovered for spinal dystrophy. World over there may be a couple of lakh patients only. And the drug costs 16 crores. Now, अब 16 करोड़ दुनिया में कौन दे सकता है? मतलब US का भी रईस आदमी 16 करोड़ नहीं दे सकता. So then there is subsidy on it. But even with that subsidy, US में चल जाता है because insurance gives the money and some government gives. अब इंडिया में 16 करोड़ इंश्योरेंस कंपनी तो देने से रही. गवर्नमेंट कभी कभी स्पॉन्सर करती है, फिर कंपनीज कभी कभी फ्री देती है. But the pricing is now 16 crores. How many of us can? So that is why these diseases are left as such. And on top of it, now if I don't consider the aspect of कि अरे हर आदमी को बचाना है मेरे को, either humanitarian or medical, then I would say that Unfortunate, because even after doing that gene therapy, the survival of the patient is not more than 10 or 15 years. So I would say that for 15 years, the patient will suffer, the family will suffer, everybody will suffer. It is better that the patient has a peaceful death. That is my view. People's view may be different. But it is like जिसको HIV हो गया, अब तूने खुद की गलती से HIV किया है, तो भुगत उसको. So those kinds of thought processes come in picture. Different people have different thought processes. And that is why orphan diseases which are less in number remain like that, unless suddenly somebody finds a profitability into it and will do it. Like the spinal dystrophy thing.
Side effect, adverse reaction. In pharmacology we studied about adverse reactions, contraindications. थोड़ा सा डिफरेंस है इसमें, साइड इफेक्ट्स, एडवर्स रिएक्शंस. तो वो थोड़ा आप स्टूडेंट्स को बताओगे, क्योंकि वो कंफ्यूज रहते हैं. इवन दो हम भी टीचर्स, बीइंग ए टीचर भी, क्योंकि आप डॉक्टर हैं, तो थोड़ा सा एक इन टर्मिनोलॉजी में स्लाइटली कंफ्यूजन रहता है.
I had a slide on that yesterday. I can pull the slide again.
And my second question is, what is the rejection criteria of any new drug molecule on the basis of toxicological study?
Okay, I'll answer both. This is the slide which I presented yesterday. To talk in very brief, side effect is something which is a colloquial term. It's not a pharmacological term. Unfortunately, it has become a pharmacological term. Side effect is anything happening because of the drug for which I did not give it. So I have a painkiller, I give aspirin, I did not want any other problem, say of nausea, and it occurred. So that's a side effect. I gave something, the patient died. I didn't want it. So it's a side effect. I gave a drug to the patient. He was walking onto the road, got hit by a car and died. I didn't want that. So that is a side effect, which is a broad thing, that anything which is not wanted occurs in a drug and you call it a side effect. Again, as I say, pharmacologically, that is no term called side effect. Unfortunately, it has come into the system now. An adverse reaction An adverse event is also an untoward medical occurrence. In a patient or clinical trial, when medicinal product does not necessarily have a causal relationship, an adverse event can occur any time in a patient, but it is not necessarily because of the drug. It may or may not. So as an example, if I give aspirin and I start having a headache. There is no relationship between me having a headache and aspirin being given. There is no documented evidence like that. But that is an event which has occurred, so it's an adverse event. Now when you link it to the drug, that is when you link a causal relationship, कि drug दिया और उसके कारण ये हुआ, then it becomes an adverse drug reaction. So that is the difference between a side effect, an adverse event, and an adverse drug reaction. Adverse events can be multiple, adverse reactions can be multiple. In any of the event which occurs, you connect it or establish a connection between the drug and the event, it becomes an adverse drug reaction. And for me, what is important is how to differentiate between the adverse drug reaction and the adverse drug event. It is extremely important, otherwise your prescription can go wrong, prescribing information can go wrong. So, what was the second question? Just 1 minute. by and large on toxicological basis, your IND can get rejected because you don't reach the NDA phase. They will reject it at IND level only. Normally it doesn't occur because pharma companies themselves are very careful. So in toxicology studies, they look for toxicology on 3 different aspects: liver, kidney, and cardiovascular system. Those are the 3 places where they look for toxicity. The other thing which they look for is carcinogenicity, and they look for teratogenicity, which is congenital deformities in animals. If these 4 parameters are decent, then the company only goes with an IND application. If they find that it is not, that is where many molecules are killed at the discovery level. They just killed at the discovery level. So if you take 1,000 molecules, 1 molecule may reach the animal studies. Of that 100, 1 will reach the human studies, so on and so forth. So that is how. But regulators tak pahunchna, where they will reject because of animal toxicity, is the rarest of rare phenomena. Because companies only don't go there. Yeah.
Sir, as you told yesterday that example of minoxidil, that it have side effects of growing hairs. So side effects can be positive and negative too, right? So nowadays people use minoxidil as especially for hair growth. So we can consider it as a side effect, or it will be the main effect of it?
No, now it is the main effect because the amount of minoxidil used is much less. So it is at a different dose that minoxidil is used, in a different formulation that minoxidil is used. Minoxidil is still not used orally, it is used in the form of a lotion. So it is the main effect because that is what they developed it. They rejected it for hypertension. They did not submit the application because it failed. But they found this, so they developed it specifically for baldness, and they grew. The truth is, minoxidil does not act in all people for hair growth.
So
If it is genetic, it will not do anything to you.
So the regulatory, all the documentations and all the studies will have to be changed according to that.
The studies are changed. A new protocol is created which will say that I am using minoxidil at this dose in this formulation for hair growth, and if the number of hair growths or patches decrease by this quantum, then I will say that it is useful. That is how the trial will be, and now the application will be use of minoxidil for hair growth in XYZ baldness, because baldness occurs for many reasons. So they will have to specify for which baldness are you talking of. If it is genetic, they will not approve for it.
Clinical trials are performed on humans, so many environmental factors.
Sorry, come again, I didn't hear you.
When clinical trials are performed on humans, there will be many environmental factors that affect the patient, the person on clinical trials are performed, like humidity, temperature, or diet, or work. So how then it will be regulated?
You are asking very practical questions, so I'll try to answer it, but there is no correct or wrong answer for it. Science as of today is not very clear as to how much the environmental factors act on a human body in a particular disease. It acts, we know. How much quantity and what quantity, we do not know. How diet intervenes can be restricted to drug food interactions. And what the drug food interaction means is, अगर मैंने खाना खाने के पहले दिया, तो what is the bioavailability and distribution of the drug in a human body? खाना खाने के बाद दिया, is it still reaching the therapeutic levels needed or not reaching the therapeutic levels? Or is particular diet increasing the efficacy of the drug or decreasing the efficacy? Those kinds of things can only be studied and can only be differentiated. As far as the environment is concerned, it cannot. However, during a clinical trial, if I see some very abnormal results from a given country, and I will consider a country to have the same environmental conditions. I'm not talking of weathers. I'm talking of environmental conditions, which is pollution, gaseous amounts in the atmosphere, or particulate matter as a pollution, or chemicals as a pollution. I will consider the country to be virtually the same. I can't go differentiating the country, otherwise the sample size which I'll require would be in millions. So I don't do that. But if I find some very abnormal results, good or bad, in a given population, in a given country, then I would like to analyze it or for that country or for that particular center and find out the reason. Which I will do by instructing the statistical guy who creates the analytical tables by saying that please give me data for this particular country of all the patients and also split in all the regions where the study was done. That is how I can come to know about it if there is something drastic. Till date, unfortunately or fortunately, there are no such major variations which are seen. It does not mean that it is not seen. There are certain ethnic variations which are seen in drugs. And in such a situation, the regulators ensure that the drug is given or not given or at a reduced dose or an increased dose to that set of population. But it is very, very difficult to do that because doctors and patients don't follow up in that way. Any more questions? I can answer more there from a medical perspective rather than a research perspective. Any question? What? Yeah. I'll answer that question also.
Sir, nowadays there are different types of mechanical devices should be used along with the drug. And these drugs composed of various types of marker compounds. And it is used in CRS therapy also. And it has more serious side effect on a human body. Then why the government should not be banned such types of mechanical devices?
Like as an example, if you give me.
Like, sir, in cancer therapy, the marker compound that should be used for the treatment, it has serious side effect of utilization of radioactive nuclides like that.
Okay. Cancer is a condition where death is definite. Death is definite. Whether it is in 5 years or in 20 years, depend upon the type of cancer. Barring few cancers, example, early stage breast cancer or an early stage of particular type of leukemia, the survival of the patient is not more than 5 years, whether you give the drug or you don't give the drug. However, today's media, actors and actresses talk, "Arey, my cancer has gone." What does that mean? It's a colloquial term which is used, and the world believes in the actor rather than the doctor. As an example, Mr. Sidhu announced to the world that his wife was cured of cancer because of Ayurveda. तो अगर वो क्योर हो गई तो हॉस्पिटल काहे को गई थी? I know which hospital she went and I know which doctor treated her. So why did she go? So there are two myths and reality. Now all cancer compounds, no matter whether it is a chemical, a biologic, a vaccine or a cell gene therapy, will be toxic to the body. What the regulators see is what is the risk benefit ratio. If the risk benefit ratio is in the favor of the patient, then they will approve the drug. But it is the responsibility of the patient, the pharmacist, the nurse and the doctor to monitor the patient continuously, and if the side effects are too high, then they need to switch the drug to something which is more possible. If not, and if the same has to be given, they have to see how the side effects can be minimized. Common side effects which are problematic in a cancer patient is nausea, vomiting and diarrhea. These are the three more. I am not talking of hair loss and all, because अगर बाल झड़ जाए तो आदमी को फर्क नहीं पड़ना चाहिए, दो किसी किसी को पड़ता है. But that is not the criteria to stop or begin the drug. So if nausea, vomiting is there, there are specific drugs which control this nausea and vomiting for cancer compounds. Like Ondem is there. Now it is used generally, but Ondem is specifically for cancer, nausea and vomiting. So that can be given and controlled. If not, they reduce the dose. If not, they change the drug to some other class compound of drugs, or different combination therapy they give, and that is how they manage it. But cancer drugs will give you toxicity. There is no two ways about it, and you have to bear it or don't take the drug. Both the choices of the patient concerned. Doctor लिख सकता है, but patient can decide also.
Sir, my question is regarding to job. Sir, if someone wants to work in RA department, is it such that he has to approach to pharmaceutical company only or any other third private institutions? Can you give example also works for it?
Regulatory department obviously is in the pharma and biotech world, but there are a set of two companies, IT companies and what are known as contract research organizations. Companies like IT companies like TCS, Accenture, Cognizant, Wipro, HCL, these companies do regulatory work for global companies. So they collect the data, or the data comes to them, and they do the writing work, or so the raw data comes. They will do a toxicology report, they may do a clinical trial report, CMC documentation. They'll assemble, and the country will say that, okay, I want to submit an IND application, and these are the 40 countries that I want to submit it. Please prepare the applications accordingly and send it to me. So it's outsourced. So companies like TCS, CROs like Parexel, IQVIA, PPD, they all do this job in India. First of all, IT department has a department called Clinical Research Department. So like when I was working, I had nothing to do with the IT group, other than telling me my computer has gone wrong, please come and correct it. So this department has only doctors, physicians, nurses, PhD chemists, microbiologists, biotechnologists. They don't have engineers.
That means, sir, if I works in pharmaceutical company RA department and IT RA department, I have to...
No, there is no IT RA department. It's RA department.
So,
IT department.
TCS is a IT company, sir.
That's why I am saying TCS is an IT company, but within the IT company, there are different departments, no? Only IT guy doesn't work only in software development. IT guy, a software developer doesn't work in artificial intelligence. A person working on software for retail doesn't work in a financial software. So there are different IT guys. So TCS also has a complete regulatory department within the clinical research or life sciences space. There are about 1,000 regulatory people working in TCS in India, Hungary, UK, US, across the world. IT RA which you are talking of, if you mean that, is a very different branch. It can sit with the clinical research, but that is a department which looks at validation of the IT systems. And that is called as CFR 21 Part 11 validation. It's a different form of a validation than what an IT does. So it requires a knowledge of the pharmaceutical industry or the finance industry or the retail industry, depending upon what the software is developed. But CFR 21 for life sciences is extremely difficult and extremely tough. And that is what is the difference. So there can be an IT regulatory department, but it will look from the perspective of a quality control of CFR 21 Part 11. What are the most
promising areas of cervical cancer research, and what are the success rate of upcoming vaccines in cervical cancer?
You ask me questions which are very controversial always. But good that you ask it. Cancer vaccines, cervical or any other cancer vaccine. Or if you have asked specifically, I will talk about cervical cancer. All cancers, the cause is not known. किसी भी कैंसर का कारण हमें आज तक मालूम नहीं है. किसके कारण होता है? अगर मुझे कल अमीबियासिस हो जाए तो मुझे मालूम है कि बिकॉज अमीबा हैज एंटामीबा हिस्टोलिटिका हैज एंटर्ड इनटू माय बॉडी, 99% or 90% of patient will have amoebiasis or dysentery etc. हार्ट अटैक मुझे क्यों होता है, कारण वो मुझे नहीं मालूम. कैसे होता है वो मुझे मालूम है. क्यों होता है मुझे नहीं मालूम. आई डोंट नो द कॉज. कैंसर कैसे होता है मुझे मालूम है. सेल चेंज हो जाती है, न्यूक्लियस चेंज हो जाता है, मल्टीप्लिकेशन होता है और कैंसर होता है. पर वो होता क्यों है? मल्टीप्लिकेशन ज्यादा क्यों होता है? I'll come to that also. All what you are talking of are risk factors. They are not the causative factors. ये medicine है. There is a difference between a risk and a cause. What does risk mean? And risk factors are multiple. Risk factors is not one. And secondly, we don't know how much is that risk. Now, I'll give you an example of cervical cancer. And you talked about carcinogenic materials. Cervical cancer is got about 5 risk factors, 5 or 6 risk factors. One is when has the pregnancy occurred and whether it is a single pregnancy or multiple pregnancy. Second, what is the ethnicity of that woman. Third, is it a smoker, non-smoker? So like that, there are 5 or 6 risk factors. One of the risk factors is HPV, human papilloma virus, one of the risk factors. Now, how much is the risk of HPV? I don't know, because no studies are done, so I have no idea about it. But I have an indirect evidence. Of the 100 people infected with HPV, about 10% have developed cancer. But I don't know what were the associated risk factors with that. So can I say कि HPV होगा तो 100% तुमको cancer होगा? I can't say that because 90 people didn't have it. So these are risk factors, मतलब होने की संभावना है, पर कितनी संभावना है ये मुझे नहीं मालूम, क्योंकि ऐसे एक्सपेरिमेंट्स हो नहीं सकते हैं. एंड हर जगह रिस्क फैक्टर्स अलग अलग होते हैं तो हो नहीं सकते. You talked about carcinogens. Very few carcinogens have been proven to cause cancer. If I give you examples, aniline dyes, जो chemical factories में होते हैं, especially leather industry, they do give rise to bladder cancer, urinary bladder. Similarly, those who do asbestos mining, आजकल बंद हो गया है. Asbestos is a ore. Iron is like an iron ore. Asbestos is an ore जो पहाड़ों से निकलता है. Similarly, is talc. हम बोलते हैं ना talcum powder use किया है. Talcum powder is a ore from a mountain. It's not something which is manufactured. Both of them, one, talc has an ovarian cancer association very strong, and asbestos is known to cause lung cancer. So very few, rest all cancerogens which you are talking of fall in the probable category. X-ray is also in the probable category. That is why X-ray CT scans, if you see in good institutes, they carry a tab here. All people who go into angiography or CT or X-ray, they keep a radiological tag here. That radiological tag comes from BARC. if that radiological tab is sent every 6 months or so, depending upon how many x-rays you are taking, to BARC to understand the amount of radiation you have gone through. If you have crossed a limit, they will ask you to get out of that x-ray and not take x-ray for a particular period of time. In Paris, there is an agency who looks after all these chemical substances which may cause cancer. May. The word may is very important. Shayad. Kadachit. So they classify this kadachit into 3 forms. One is possible. अब तुम कुर्सी पे बैठे हो, मैं यहाँ बात कर रहा हूँ इस माइक से कैंसर हो सकता है, मेरे को क्या मालूम. So such are there where proof and association is very basic, minimal, may or may not be there. The next level is probable, though in English we use probable like something else. Next level of surety is probable, and the third level of surely is definitive. ये 3 classifications है उसके, in between भी आजकल classifications आए हैं. So they change many of them from one classification to other, नीचे से ऊपर, ऊपर से नीचे. So that is it. But these all chemicals and all these viruses which we are talking of, they have to have some other components of the risk factors and something else in the body, the way body reacts, which we don't know about. All that combination gives rise to cancer, not a standalone factor. Coming back to HPV, HPV has got about 150 strains. Strains means different genetic materials in the same virus. So there are 150 strains. Of that 150 strains, about, I'm not very sure, but it is 9 or 12 strains. I have to read that, I have forgotten it. About 9 to 12 strains are most likely, amongst the strains, most likely to cause cervical cancer. Or, in other words, in cervical cancer, the maximum strains which were seen were of those 15 or 12 varieties. Right? But in many other cervical cancer patients, HPV was not seen only. So can I say that HPV is the cause? Now when they developed the vaccine, they first developed it with 4 strains. So there are 6 strains or 10 strains still left. Why? Then they developed it with 9. Now they have come up with, I think, 12 or 15 strains. So what are we trying to do? So once you take a vaccine, it is not 100% sure that you will not have, because other 5 factors are still existing, which you have not done. Heart attack, it is a similar thing. Genetics, male, female, stress, lifestyle, diet, hypertension, diabetes. 7 or 8 causes. Cholesterol. What we say? Cholesterol ले लो, सब ठीक हो जाएगा. अरे stress का क्या? उसका क्या करूं मैं? अगर वो ठीक नहीं होगा तो मैं still मेरे को heart attack आना है. So that is why nowadays, unfortunately, the difference between risk and cause has gone off. So if you type causes of heart attacks, the first thing which you will see is cholesterol. Even in clinical papers, it is like that. You go to a doctor, you ask him, and it is like that. So you need to understand the difference between the two and then interpret a particular thing, not otherwise.
But in some cases, drugs have many side effects. So do drug decreases the life expectancy?
As you would have seen, adverse events is the 4th or the 6th largest cause of death in US. So it can. It does cause. It does cause. And that is because of adverse event, wrongly giving medication, wrongly taking medication, allergy, hypersensitivity, various things can occur. So it does cause, and that is why pharmacovigilance is very critical, but unfortunately nobody pays attention to it. There's some question on toxicology, right? See, when you are looking for toxicity and its management in medicine, you may not be able to manage all the poisons. You may be able to manage only a few poisons because very clearly antidotes are available, and in some places it is not. As an example, if a snake bite occurs, you will be able to treat yourself if reached in a particular time, because today the antivenoms which are available in India contains the antivenom for all the 4 snakes: crate, branded crate, cobras, vipers and pit vipers. But if you think you can go to US and survive on the same vaccine as you have got in India, or the vaccine, the treatment or antivenom, you may not, because those venoms are different than Indian venoms. So in toxicology, when you are treating a patient in a hospital which has got, or you are investigating, the things are very different as compared to drug safety. And the first aim in toxicology, if a toxic reaction occurs, is basically to get the poison out of your body as early as possible. And then to think of giving an antidote if it is available, or support the biological vital parameters as much as possible. But otherwise, forensic medicine and toxicology is predominantly used in clinical research to analyze the data which evolves from animal studies and help the people to decide on what dose would be non-toxic in humans along with doctors. So that is a role which a toxicologist or a forensic guy plays. Forensic is more of identification of problems for criminal purposes, or in suicides and death. Toxicology is more related to medicine and discovery and development of drugs. Okay.
Sir, I had a different question.
Yeah.
On UCPMP 2024, Uniform Code of Pharmaceutical Marketing Practices. Sir, what used to happen before this code came into force, and what are the loopholes that pharmaceutical companies are able to use even after its implementation, and what can be changed to make this code more successful?
The Pharmaceutical Code of Ethics, it may be named by different names, is a code which governments have, and it is a code which is developed by the pharmaceutical industry. So globally you have PHARM, PHARAM, as a collection of American pharmaceutical companies. There is IFPMA, which is Europe based, and in India government is trying to do something now. Latin America there is something, but by and large multinational companies follow the IFPMA and the PHARM code. It's a code of ethics. It's voluntary. It's not a compulsion that if you don't do it, you will break a law and you will be penalized. What the code of ethics say, and if you apply it in totality, and I know when I worked in Burroughs Wellcome was supposed to be known as a union, not a pharmaceutical company, because they had very, very strict codes of marketing. So what does it actually say? Don't market a product what it is not used for. If you are saying that this product is useful for A, B and C, give a reference as to who said that. As simple as, I cannot say hydrocortisone is useful in relieving inflammation without a reference. Secondly, if I am using an adjective, if I say this drug is safer, then first of all I cannot say it is safe. So if I use the word safer, which is an adjective, I'll have to say as compared to what and who said that. It cannot be that company said that. Sorry, somebody external guy, published guy has to state, not a blog or a Facebook post or a WhatsApp post. It has to be a clinical paper. So those are certain things. Other things are, doctors should not be given any monetary compensation for a prescription. Clinical research there are specific limitations and they have to follow that. But otherwise you can't do that. You can't gift a doctor, you can't sponsor. In India, strictness has come up because if you recently see some doctors from Indore, Ujjain, Devas were carried on for some foreign trip by Abbott, and the case is going on right now. But very unfortunately, as I said, they are not legally provisioned and hence it is voluntary. So in general, I would say multinationals follow it more than Indian companies. But it's a code of ethics. Now my ethics, if it is, though ethics is to be same, but some companies say this is not my ethics. Some say, अरे marketing में सब कुछ चल रहा है तो हम भी करेंगे. It's the same for even selling a soap. I mean, they use right terms into better, brighter, new क्या है? New तो कुछ भी नहीं है. वही सोडा बाय कर्व यूज करते हो आप सब में. नया क्या है? कुछ नहीं. But packaging new है, but वो नहीं बोलेंगे. So those are the kinds of problems. But these are ethical concerns, depends upon how ethical you are in a given situation.
Sir, why is India behind in API manufacturing and is heavily dependent on China for API import?
I mean, you're moving to political questions. This has got to do more with commercial rather than anything. India used to manufacture APIs themselves. However, in the past, politics of India with other countries, specifically the Europe and US, especially the US, wanted to develop China. So they moved their manufacturing of pharmaceuticals like other manufacturing, electronics and whatever you call, to China. So China is a communist country and China's condition was that we will manufacture, give me the technology. So they got the technology. They evolved on that technology and started manufacturing on their own and kicking out the original company out. The original company was also very happy because they got it cheaper from them. Indians realized that they can get a cheaper stuff. They also ran to China. And now they are dependent on China. Fortunately, China is dependent on India for formulations, because they don't have that capability. So it survives. But it is a political reason why it moved out of India. And now if you see, I am not giving a political statement, I am just saying on the basis of what is happening. People otherwise would label me ki BJP pro, anti-BJP, pro-Congress. I am not going into that. Today if you see, the Prime Minister of India is continuously harping, manufacture the basics in India. Whether it is electronic components, whether it is cars, scooters, batteries, whatever, manufacturing it in India. So there are many pharma companies which have now started to think of manufacturing important APIs where the source is only China and not other countries to bring it back into India. And for that incentives are given, various things are given. So they have started, it will take a long time before we reach self-sufficiency. But it will. It is the same way as rare earth metals. Rare earth is not rare on the earth. They are enough present. The problem is extraction. China has mastered it. So now China controls 99% of it. So now we have to develop it. So that is the only reason.
Thank you, sir, for today's lecture. This marks the end of the fourth day of our workshop. We feel gratitude towards Dr. Shirish Sherlekar, sir, for enlightening us with his practical expertise and experience, in-depth knowledge, and valuable insights on the topic of regulatory affairs. We are thankful for your time, effort, and clarity with which you explained the concepts. We are truly grateful to all of you for making this day successful, and we look forward to welcome you to the next session. The timings for tomorrow's session will be 10 a.m. Along with tomorrow's session, validatory function will be conducted and certificates will only be provided tomorrow. Only the registered participants will be allowed. The venue for tomorrow's session will be SOET Hall, Samrat Vikramaditya Vishwavidyalaya, Ujjain. Before leaving, all participants are kindly requested to mark their attendance in the attendance register. It is mandatory for all the departments. Thank you.